All right. Hey there. It's time for some mealworm Q&A while I organize to get ready for the expansion. I need to get boxes that are there over to here to get all that out of the way. So I got an email with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 questions. So we're going to go through this. I don't give names and locations. We're going to say that this person's in the U.S. And that their name is E. So, E's first question. I noticed that Midwest Mealworms primarily sells live mealworms. Could you share your thought process behind focusing on only live mealworms, especially in the context of exploring culinary applications for human consumption, such as baking mixes or chips? Are live mealworms the only kind that would be cost effective, or did you just decide to focus on them because they don't require as much processing? Really good question. Couple things. In the U.S. right now, remember we're U.S. focused at the moment, both the questioner and myself. In the U.S. at the moment, the acceptance level on insects as food is very low. It's a very niche area right now. It's growing. It'll continue to grow. But it is very, 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 very niche. And so, one, just from a business perspective, oh, that could be bad. Oh, okay. One, from a business perspective, there's just not the potential for the needed revenue to sustain a business. It would be far riskier, in my opinion. And the regulations for what you need to do in order to raise those insects, what conditions they need to be in, and then the processing aspect of it. Not a lot of regulatory folks in my area had any clue what I was talking about. I did research it originally when I started. I looked into, the different methods in order to process. I looked into other people processing it and me just focusing on the raising it because that's what I'm personally interested in. And when I reached out to different organizations, nobody had a clue what to tell me or how to approach raising insects for human consumption. I think now there's much more clarity on it. And there are some folks that have done it. And so, I could reach out to them and say, hey, who did you talk to? What processes or guidelines do you follow? And Europe has really moved forward on their end with not only feed regulations, but food regulations as well. And so there's some momentum happening. But I just didn't, at the time, when I started this adventure, 8 years ago, I didn't. I wasn't going to be able to make any revenue to keep the business going. So I focused 100%. Well, I guess you could say 90% on raising and selling live mealworms. I did do some dehydrated or dried mealworms with a commercial industrial microwave. Which is actually in the big box behind there. I sold it. I have zero desire to utilize it. I experimented with it, learned quite a bit, was able to validate my presumptions, my original analysis that dried mealworms aren't financially viable at a small scale for a U.S. producer. So there was some good there. Let's see here. I gotta think for a second. The use of insects for food, though, is coming along. So what I would project is I'm going to continue to focus on live mealworms with the expansion and get all the processes and stuff squared away. And then it's my next project, big project, is going to be black soldier fly larva. So I don't think I'll get into the feed, or I'm sorry, the human food arena. So let me check. Are live mealworms the only kind that would be cost effective? From a business perspective, yes. So a small insect farm like this can't compete with imported dried insects. They're just far too cheap. Just our labor alone would outweigh everything, not even counting expenses outside of labor. I think I got, from a processing perspective, you're right. So raising the live insects, if I had to dehydrate them or dry them or grind them up into a powder, more processing, more machinery, more space that's taken up for that instead of raising it. It would be interesting to look at a decentralized model where you have a single location that's the processing facility. Think about like kitchens that do this, where they rent out their space to small farmers who come in, do their preparation, and then leave, right? There's the potential for something like that in the insect world, but the markets just need to mature a little bit more. Dealing with low humidity. Question number 2, dealing with low humidity. I reside in an area with relatively low humidity. How do you recommend dealing with low humidity in the mealworm farming environment? Are there specific strategies or practices you would suggest? 100%, I can answer that one. Sonic humidifier, ultrasonic humidifier. I actually have a video on this, how I built it, all the parts to it, and a quick walkthrough of how it works. I'll link it in the comments below. But ultrasonic humidifier is fantastic. You get that coupled with a tank, something small, whatever it is you need. They make different sizes of those humidifiers. Yowza. Sorry, guys. Sorry to you folks for the noise, but got to get this done. In Missouri, in the wintertime, we'll have pretty dry air. And so if your environment that you are raising in has low humidity, the ultrasonic fogger or ultrasonic humidifier will 100% solve your problem. I used a standard humidifier in my old building, which was 20 by 15, 20 by 20, something like that. And it worked, but it wasn't efficient. And so when I moved to the bigger building, I would have needed multiple of those humidifiers. And that's when I researched the ultrasonic. I don't know why I keep saying Sonic the Hedgehog, maybe? I don't know. But golly, one nail causing a whole bunch of heartache. So go check out that video. I'm not trying to get you to just watch more videos, but it literally walks through how to build it. It's got all the parts that I used linked. I'm gonna have to do that from the other side. And it will solve your problem. I found it, like I didn't invent this. I found it in use for mushroom farmers because they also need high humidity. So I used to run at 75% humidity to reduce my labor, but that was before I got the garden hose and small pump, and now I just spray all the mealworms. And so I keep my humidity down between 45 to 50% to reduce grain mite possibility, and then I spray the mealworms 3 times a week. Right now it takes about 20 minutes to do that. With the expansion, it might probably take 40 minutes, but still better than keeping the humidity too high. Number 3, winter temperature control. As winter approaches, I'm concerned about maintaining an optimal temperature for mealworms. Do you have any tips for keeping the farming environment warm during the winter? Would using 2 heat lamps in a garage be sufficient, or are there alternative suggestions? This 100% depends on... Oh, how am I going to get back there? 100% depends on how well insulated your infrastructure is. So you mentioned a garage. Even if it's an insulated garage, you're going to need to have insulated doors. And even at that, I don't think, based on where I know you are, I don't think that 2 heat lamps are going to cut it, unless you've got a smaller space than that garage. Like a full-size garage with 2 heat lamps isn't going to do it. But if your mealworm farm is condensed into one area, what I would suggest is box that in somehow. Rigid foam is a really good option. It's not super expensive, from my perspective anyway, but just rigid foam, 1 inch or 2 inch. Build yourself a little door to get in and out, and basically enclose your farm and then utilize some sort of heat. You want to keep in mind, you don't want to burn your place down, right? So heat lamps give me the heebie-jeebies, just because I don't have a lot of experience with them. I've used them with my quail, just 1 hatch of quail. And so I'm not super experienced there, but just be mindful of whatever heat source, use whatever you are comfortable with, and whatever is potentially cost effective. But honestly, it's really going to depend on the insulation for your building. For the building here, I've got 2x4 walls, so R11 batt insulation, and then the 2-inch rigid foam. Then we've got 15 inches plus of blown-in insulation on top. And so that was an expense at the beginning that is paying dividends now. It was 26 degrees outside last night, and the heat is not on in the mealworm farm. They are generating heat and keeping themselves warm. It's actually exhausting air to cool it off in there, even with temps this low. We might be hitting the temperature that stops. If it starts going below the 20s, I think that they won't be able to keep up. But yeah, they'll put off a little bit of heat as well. Number 4, starting equipment costs. Considering your experience, could you provide insights into the starting cost of equipment for a mealworm farm? What key equipment items would you consider essential for someone just starting out? This one is very, very dependent on what size colony you're going to have. So when I first started, my colony was 3 trays in a closet. And so you really don't need equipment. You need, like a cheap sifter from Dollar General, Dollar Store, wherever. And no, I can't put that down there. These are all, I don't really use these anymore. Oh, put them here. So you need something to sift your frass. You need a mask too, by the way. Full face respirator is ideal. Frass is an allergen. Frass is an allergen. So the more you expose yourself to it, if you are not already allergic to it, you will become allergic to it. 100% guaranteed. So if you want to do this for any length of time, please protect yourself. I'm an admin in a Facebook group started by another amazing mealworm farmer. Super lucky to have the opportunity to be an admin there. And I've been in there for, 8 years. And that's just a guess, honestly. And I can't count on one hand, 2 hands, 4 hands, the number of people who have come in and said, I have this weird cough. I just started raising mealworms. Is it related to them? I've been raising mealworms for a couple years now, and now I get all itchy and scratchy. And actually, as I look down at my arms, I don't know if you can see it or not, but these bumps here are from the exoskeletons. I didn't have my sleeves on when I was sifting some of the frass, and I got some of it on me while I was sweating. And I kind of break out in little hives. So full face respirator is what I advise. If you do anything less than that, you are risking your eyes, your sight, your lungs, your breathing, risking far, far, far too much. Don't do it. Get a full face respirator. Let's see, other equipment. So I'm going to just presume that you're going to go with a colony size bigger than just 3 trays, what I started out with. And, let's say you've got 10, 50, 100 trays, or you're thinking about that. What I would recommend is the 5-gallon soil sifting set. They're green sifters, round. They fit on a 5-gallon bucket. They come in different sets. You want to get the 1/8 inch, the 1/20th, no, the 1/12th, and the 1/30th. Those are the 3 that you will use heavily. So I'd recommend you get that. There's a sifting set that has a couple other sizes in it that just aren't useful. But sometimes it could be, just depends on what your startup costs are, or startup funding is, to get things rolling. But that will help you sift and sort and do all the main primary functions that you're going to need to do. The other thing I would recommend is a pupa sifter from spacecoastmealworms.com. Scott Jost, he's another admin in the Mealworm Farming Co-op Facebook group. He designed and he laser cuts those, still does. He used to raise mealworms, he stopped, partially I think because of the allergies and partially because he really enjoys the laser cutting stuff. He does all sorts of stuff with that now. He got an even bigger machine. It's really cool. But he still cuts and sells the pupa sifters. He's got all different sizes, but it will drastically cut down your pupa processing time. You're not going to get all the pupa. Even I don't get them all. If they pupate too early because of density or stress, or some people say it's genetics, then they're going to go through that and you just won't get them. But you'll get the majority of them. I would say I get 90% of mine. And that's way better from a labor perspective than trying to pick every single one of those things out without that sifter. So he sells all different kinds. I use the XL because I'm sifting pupa twice a week for an hour and a half to 2 hours at a time. So the XL comes in handy, but they do, he does have smaller sizes available. Let's see what else. Beginning. Split pea flour. Whatever substrate you get, wheat bran, wheat midds, oatmeal. Don't use oatmeal. Don't use flat oats. Use something that's been ground up if you're going to use oatmeal. What are these? I can't get back there. Sorry, I'm thinking here. Dang it. Okay. I'll do this tomorrow. I'll move this around. Split pea flour will be absolutely critical when you have a grain mite outbreak. You can do everything right 100% of the time, and something will happen and you'll get a grain mite outbreak. Grain mites can decimate a colony. They can kill your mealworms, get out of control. If you have your mealworms in your house, you mentioned potentially a garage, they're a thing that can go anywhere. And so you want to be prepared for that. Split pea flour will kill grain mites. I have split pea flour available on my site. Of course, I say it works if I'm trying to sell it, but go look at the published study that's linked on the page for that. If you go to my website, midwestmealworms.com/pages/mites, there'll be a bunch of information along with the link study published that shows that split pea flour kills grain mites. Not only is there research published on that, but there are countless people who have said that it works. I have also used it 4 times. I've had 4 grain mite outbreaks, used it 4 times to control that, get things back where they needed to be, and get rid of those grain mites. There's other protocols you can follow, reduce your humidity, hold back moisture, a whole bunch of things on that website I mentioned that I put out there. But get you some split pea flour, because what you can do with that is build section things off. Like you can literally use it as a barrier. And I've got a series on my website. You know, again, not to get more watch time from you, but to help justify what I'm telling you, and not just me being a salesman, which I'm a terrible salesman, by the way. But if you go to my YouTube channel and go check out the grain mite infestation of 2023, grain mite outbreak grain mites 2023, something like that. I'll link it in the comments as well for ease. But I had a grain mite outbreak in this building. First one ever. Been here for about 2 years. And I had an issue. So I ran through everything I did, the protocol I followed, the things I did, what happened, etc. I believe it was 7 or 8 videos over a week and a half. And so that'll give you a real world insight into what happens and how to deal with that. So split pea flour, definitely something you want to have on hand. And you don't need a lot of it. A little bit goes a long way. Size, start with a pound, grab 2 pounds. I think a pound for me is $9.99. 2 pounds is $14.99. Most of that's the shipping cost. I get my split peas from Azure Standard. I buy the 25 pounds in bulk and grind it up myself. So I grind it as needed. I'm going to switch over and use it as a preventative. I'm going to stop deep freezing my substrate. But that's the other thing to keep in mind is you're going to want some way to either deep freeze that at 0 degrees Fahrenheit or cook it, your substrate, not the split pea flour, the substrate, to get rid of not only grain mite eggs and grain mites, but pantry moths, other insects, flower beetles, etc., that might be in the substrate or have eggs in the substrate. So I don't know the temperatures to cook it because I don't do that. I go through too much of it. So I put mine in a deep freeze for 48 hours, 0 degrees Fahrenheit. And that has been very, very good so far. The one outbreak I had mid-year, I think it was like June or July. It's in the videos. The outbreak I had was actually caused from black soldier fly larvae that I was testing and playing with at the time. The grain mites came in on the food waste that I had gathered from a couple places in town near me, and it originated in one of their bins and had spread a little bit. But the video goes through all that. So I haven't had issues with the deep freezing. What I'm going to move to, though, is I'm going to be going through too much substrate to be able to deep freeze. And so I'm going to add split pea flour proactively, which means I'll be making it even more frequently than I do now and integrating it into every bin. So let's see, what else might you need? I think that's everything. I'm going to again say respirator. Get a respirator, full face respirator. Yeah, I think that's everything. Let me go look at next question. Ooh. Cost of mealworm startup. ChatGPT mentioned that 1 cup of mealworm flour can be derived from around 3,000 mealworms. Could you provide an estimate of the cost associated with acquiring 3,000 live mealworms? To buy from me is $24 plus some shipping to like East or West Coast states. Cost to produce that is variable. I don't know if 1 cup of mealworm flour actually comes from 3,000 live mealworms. 5,000 is roughly going to be, oh, what is that, a pound? I don't know. I'm not sure. I can't do that math right now in my head for some reason. But I'm not sure where this 1 cup to 3,000 mealworms. I would validate that before. I'm a fan of ChatGPT and AI. I've posted about that already. And I'm going to use Opus AI to cut all of this up and post little snippets of info too, along with the full length one, and try to show everybody how I do that, because there were some folks that were curious and a bit concerned about that. Number 6, further culinary exploration. Extending the conversation on culinary exploration beyond baking mixes or chips. Do you have any additional suggestions or ideas for mealworm-based products that could be explored for commercial purposes? I honestly feel like as a topping, like when you dehydrate those mealworms, they have kind of a crunchy, it's not a crouton substitute, but it could be. The other thing is I'm not sure about freeze-dried. I use that microwave dehydrator, which, it just nukes everything, right? And so what's that actually doing to the nutrients? Who knows? But freeze-dried might have a different texture to it when you eat it. And so I'd be curious if that could be used as a topping. Again, that's super niche, right? Because nobody really likes to look at their salad and see bugs. We're not used to that in the US, right? But mealworms and the beetles and even the pupa all have a ton of protein. So if you could dehydrate that, make a protein powder out of it, then use it for anything that you need protein in, honestly, right? I mean, that's a super huge list of stuff. The beetles have an off-putting taste. I don't know if that's true, if they are processed into a powder, but they just have an off-putting taste, according to chickens and poultry. Like, they just don't like to eat them. Natural survival thing from a beetle perspective. I haven't actually tried the beetles, to be honest. Number 7, general tips for beginners. Finally, do you have any general tips or advice for someone just starting out in the mealworm farming business? Any lessons learned or insights that could prove valuable? I would say take your time. Be patient. The big, I don't know if it's a big issue. It was for me. I would generalize and say it's a bigger issue for most folks in the US because we are so used to our attention spans being just short, and mealworms take forever to grow. It's not one of those quick dopamine inducing things that trigger that and get you, satisfy that need that we are being conditioned to have. So be patient, or if you're wanting to exercise and get better at being patient, raise mealworms. That's my biggest tip, is that it's going to take a while. Be patient. You will get grain mites. You will have issues. Keep notes. So keep track of when you harvest and the quantity that you harvest, how many beetle trays you have, beetle ages. I've got a bunch of videos on beetles. Let's see. Keeping data is helpful because that way you can look back in time and see, like if all of a sudden you have a drop in production, you can go back and see, oh, I had a bunch of beetle trays and I didn't replenish those in time. And so that's why I have this gap, right? Like keeping that data over time is helpful. Source your mealworms appropriately. Obviously there's me, but if you can find somebody local, that way you can get, 1, build that relationship with them, 2, support local. And 3, if you can't find someone, like, you can go pick them up, buy local, because the transit time to get from them to you is potentially shorter than from me to you, right? I think me to you is 2 days, oddly enough. That's just how the logistics work for your particular area from me. But if you can find somebody that ships in 1 day, then there's less stress, less potential for issues. So find somebody regional. I ship to your location every Monday, so no issues if you want to grab those from me. Wherever you source them from, let them know that your goal and intent is to raise your own mealworms. A lot of places will... This is a sensitive topic. I don't want to say a lot of places. There's the potential that mealworms are, the mealworms that you acquire have been treated with a juvenile growth hormone. It's a natural growth hormone. So the companies will say, we don't treat them, we don't add anything, we don't, add any chemicals, because mealworms naturally produce this hormone. If you apply it in mass, then the mealworms will not pupate. My personal opinion, so I haven't talked to companies about this. I don't know why they do it. My personal opinion is that pupation is one of the tougher things to deal with when selling live insects and live mealworms, in particular. And so when you sell live mealworms to someone, they want the larva, they want the worm, right? And when they see the weird looking alien thing that is a pupa, they don't like that, right? Like, I bought mealworms, what is this? The simple way to avoid that issue is to treat your mealworms with the hormone, and then they will not pupate. The downside is that over what I have personally noticed, based on my experience in buying from multiple locations early on when I was getting started to try to understand how to do all this, I would get mealworms that would have a smell to them. I can't describe that smell. I don't remember it now, but it smelled different. And what I came to find is that over the course of 2 to 3 weeks, those larvae would start to die off. I would have some pupate. So it's not 100% that don't pupate. So I definitely would have some that would pupate, but way more would die as opposed to pupate. And then the ones that did not have a smell did not have that issue. I would have a little bit of die off just from general stress, usually within the first week, depending on time of year and hot versus cold, etc. Die off is a natural thing for one, and two, shipping is stressful. And so, the best practice for most folks is to add 10% extra to your order just to account for that, as well as any potential size differencing in order to make sure you get the quantity that you ordered. So whoever you source from, you want to ask, or tell them, my intent is to hatch these out and raise my own. Are there any issues with the larva that will prevent them from, most of them from pupating? The other reason to ask that is, in a scenario in the insect farm, in some instances, I might get overpopulated with pupa, or overpopulated with large larvae. And if you want to buy some of those, I would love to get those to you, and probably give you a discount, right? Like I'm not in that scenario now, because I'm expanding and I need every larva I can get. Trying to hold back a sneeze there. But the other reason to reach out and say that is, in some cases, there might be an opportunity for larger larvae to be sent out, because if if your goal is to get pupa, when you see those larvae pupate when you get them, you're not going to be upset, right? So that would be my tip for getting your colony started from a sourcing perspective. If you, in my response to your email with the link to the video, I'll also give you a link to another producer in your area, trusted producer, fantastic mealworms, and something to consider from a purchasing perspective. Let's see, any other tips? Did I mention full face respirator? No. Let's see. Be patient as you expand. What I noticed as my colony expanded, and my goal was to increase my colony to raise more live mealworms, to sell live mealworms. My ultimate goal, though, for myself personally and for my business, is I'm in a 2,100 square foot building. 90% of that, once I build the wall here, is going to be for raising insects. And then I've got 2 projects I have to finish: the larger sifter and frass, handling the frass. I've got a chore time auger. I'm going to set up a system to do all that, but I need to build that and prove it out. But once I have that, then I've got all of the pieces of this figured out. And my next goal is to help other people stand up their own farms in other locations. I don't want to continue to get bigger and bigger. And so, depending on what your goals are, if your goals are to raise these mealworms to sell them, your processes are going to be different than if you're raising them to feed to your own quail, chickens, reptiles, etc. Because if you're feeding these to your own quail, you don't have to be as diligent around the processing of them and keeping, separating out the pupa, or separating out the frass before those larger larvae start to pupate. Separating out the pupa before the beetles emerge. You don't have to be as diligent with that, because you can just throw all that in with your poultry or your reptiles, if they're not picky reptiles. The beetles are a little crunchier, so that may not work for some of the reptiles, but it really depends on what your goal is. That's going to define your processes. And once you figure that out, when you expand your colony, they're going to change. You're going to need different sizes of sifters, potentially. You're going to need some mechanization. And I mean simple stuff. So like when I went from, 10 to 50 trays and moved into a larger number of trays, one of the things I did is I took an exercise machine. You stand on it. It's a vibration plate. It just goes back and forth. I've got videos of that as well. I took that and strapped a bucket to it and put the gold panning or soil sifting sets on top to help me sift the frass out mechanically with that, instead of me shaking the bucket. That's going to change how you do things. And so when you expand, add in some more time for you to be able to process things and change things and address things. Get really solid with your production if you're selling. Maybe get a little bit in the bank. Learn how to do refrigeration so you can handle boluses. Don't sell everything that you have. Hold some of that back. You don't want to sell too much. Make sure that you are holding back the larger larvae in appropriate percentage, 10 to 15% to keep and maintain the colony size, 20 and above to expand your colony size. Use wheat bran. I've got a video on wheat bran versus wheat mids. The mealworms don't eat all of the mids, and so it gunks up the sifters and gunks up the larvae too. So it's difficult over time to separate them out. Oatmeal, like flat oats, are terrible. They'll mold really easily. They're really hard to sift. If you can only get flat oats, grind them up like a coffee grinder if you're doing a small operation, or you can get a grinder on eBay. I've got one. Unfortunately, it's up there and it's really heavy, but it's what I grind my split pea flour with. You can probably grind oatmeal with it. And it was like $100 at the time, so probably like $120, $130 now. Potatoes, carrots are good. Water gel crystals, look into those if you're comfortable with them. They're super easy to manage. I use them to get me where I'm at. I am switching over to just water for the larva. I can't do potatoes or carrots. There's too much cost to purchase and process, chop those things up. So I don't do that. Fun fact, mealworms will process anything they eat out of their system within 72 hours. So things like styrofoam, they'll eat that. None of that's left over in their system. Stanford published a study proving that. So I use water gel crystals to feed, I used to feed the larva. And I was comfortable with that because the insect would be done with that within 3 days. And so if folks are wanting organic mealworms, please know that all of the organic stuff that they're eating, they are getting rid of or metabolizing in their system. That's not to say that organic's not good or not equivalent, just something to keep in mind, and maybe put some ease to folks who can't afford the organic option. And from a water gel perspective, same thing. Like they're going to eat that to get their moisture, and then they will defecate all that out, and their body has metabolized it. It's not left in their system. It is in the frass, but it breaks down over time. But my goal now is to move into getting frass tested, analyzed, and from a cost perspective and a process perspective, water gel crystals are starting to become a burden at the size that I need. So simply spraying into the trays is much faster and labor cost efficient, along with just, I don't have to buy the water gel crystals. I think that's everything. I'm sorry it took me so long to get back to you. I've been super busy with this expansion. I'm behind. I got to catch up. I got a big plan for this week and trying to execute on that, but was organizing and sorting, so I figured I'd do this. If you guys have more questions, please let me know. Leave them in the comments. I'm going to try to chop this up with Opus AI so you guys can see how, like, I did this content. It was just me talking, right? Opus Clips AI, sorry, goes through and looks at, I'll ask it to look at 30-second snippets, and it will go and grab what it thinks are good snippets, and then I go in and look at those and edit them to make sure that they make sense. So AI is not taking over the business yet. Hopefully it doesn't. So, but thank you for the questions, E. If I missed anything, please let me know, and away we go.